content that is designed to magnetize new clients can also do an amazing job of retaining existing clients, because it shows them, hey, I'm committed to my game. I'm still committed to my clients. I'm still here. I'm still developing. I'm still growing, right? Especially if, you as an advisor, you're amassing extra qualifications, extra credentials, etc., sharing about those things. So your existing clients, as well as your new clients, know that you're continually committed to them. That can work really well.
Welcome, Model FAs. David DeSell here, president of Model FA and your host of the Model FA podcast. I'm excited to bring you our guest today, Jaimie Sarah. Also, a big thank you to one of our clients, Amir Noor, who had done some work and had some conversations with Jaimie in the past. And throughout those conversations thought, hey, I think Jaimie would be great to join the podcast. So he put us in an email introduction and here we are. So two things. One is big thank you to Amir. And number two, if there's anyone listening that thinks either you yourself would be a great guest, or if you know someone who you think would be a great guest, we're more than happy to receive those inquiries. So simply email me at david@modelfa.com. And I'm happy to facilitate and see if it's a good fit. But without further ado, Jaimie Sarah is the founder of Definitely, which is a coaching and consulting company that helps smart, talented, service-based experts to attract and retain more high caliber clients with integrity. She does this using the Aligned Business Blueprint, which is a proprietary blend of executive coaching and marketing consulting that helps her clients transform both their way of being and their messaging and offers. Jaimie is also the host of the Jaimie Sarah Show podcast, which will be linked in our show notes. So definitely feel free to check that out. On that show, she interviews high and ultra high achieving entrepreneurs to help her listeners take both their self-expression and their success to the next level. She's been an entrepreneur for the last 6 years. And prior to this, spent a decade in corporate marketing in both London and New York. And based on London, this will be a very nice episode to listen to, considering her accent that you'll hear here in a moment. And she helped companies like SAP and Thomson Reuters create tens of millions in additional retention and upsell revenue. So with that, Jaimie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Excellent. So tell us, I'm kind of curious. So you're in sort of, call it corporate setting for about 10 years. And then my guess is you kind of got this itch and this inspiration to break off and do something on your own. So give me a sense as to what that kind of decision-making process was, what that aha was that ultimately enabled you to take this leap of faith.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I love telling this story. It's kind of one of my favorite stories to tell. I was on the subway one day in New York and I bumped into a coach. We were in very close quarters and I looked at her and she looked at me and we got chatting. And I just was like, this woman is like nothing I've ever experienced. Like she had so much energy and she was so self-expressed and she was so joyful. And, New York is a high energy place. But there's a lot of stress and tension and like rushing in New York. And so she just had such a clean and clear energy. I was really drawn to her and ended up doing some work with her. And then it was that made me realize, hey, I think I want to train to be a coach too, because I want to have that level of mastery for myself. And I also wanted to become a better leader. And, I wanted to kind of start managing people. I wasn't managing people at the time. And then as soon as I started my coaching training, I got hooked on it and realized, yeah, this is the thing. And initially, I kind of thought I was leaving marketing behind. And I just started the business with a view to just coaching. And then realized quite quickly that my clients wanted me to blend the coaching and the marketing knowledge that I had. And so then incorporated them together.
Excellent. Well, it's cool too to hear. I've been to New York a handful of times. And when you're on the subway, typically, people are heads down, in their phones, AirPods in, and there isn't a lot of interaction. So the fact that you're able to interact with someone in a setting that typically isn't conducive to that is pretty cool to hear. So some of the topics that we're going to be chatting through today are centered around client attraction and client retention, just how to be a good human in general in an effort to retain some of the folks that you're currently working with, referral strategies from clients, and then this idea of asking for what you want. So I stole this saying a while ago. I forget where I heard it, so I can't even give credit to it, but the saying of you have not because you ask not. So a lot of times people are wondering why they're not getting, what it is that they're seeking. And, come to find out a lot of folks just haven't asked for that and maybe don't feel comfortable asking. So we're going to unpack that a little bit as well. But talk to me, let's first start with client attraction, because when you think about growing a business, you need to have some awareness, some attraction, some business development, obviously retain those folks, and along the way, making sure that you're asking for what you want. So we'll kind of keep those in order, so to speak. But when you think about client attraction in general, and if you can have this sort of a tilt towards the financial services industry, what have you found are some of the best ways to garner attention from the folks that ultimately you're trying to serve?
So definitely, I think in the, financial advisory and kind of financial services-based industry, it's definitely education, so it's definitely empowering the end users with, new information, right? So educating them. Hey, have you heard about this? Hey, do you know about this? Hey, here's 10 ways that this can help you, right? In a really informational way that isn't too overwhelming. And also through a broad range of different mediums, for example, right, 1 minute being on a podcast, the next minute sharing an infographic on social media, the next minute being featured in Forbes or being featured in another publication with an authoritative article. But definitely, I think the educational piece, and then combined with a bit of personal storytelling, right? So personal storytelling around your own journey, what inspired you to do what you do, what are some of the things that you learned, and what are some of the mistakes you realized that you were making, and how has that shaped your mission and the way that you uniquely want to change the world?
Have you come across and followed Gary Vaynerchuk at all?
Yes.
Cool. So when I stopped being an advisor and transitioned over to the consulting space as an advisor, it was pretty much 100%, maybe 95% outbound, where I'm just kind of hitting the phone and sending emails and working with centers of influence and things like that. And when I got into the consulting space, I wanted to kind of prove to myself that what you just said actually works. So I refused to pick up the phone. I refused to send out emails. The extent of what I did was I built up my LinkedIn network, my Instagram network, my Facebook network of folks in my target market, which, are financial advisors. And there's a book that I read from Gary called Crushing It. It's got the yellow cover. And that was the book that kind of gave me the confidence to take that leap of faith. And it's interesting how you build up your network. And I have a lot of folks who will try social media. And I say try specifically because they'll do it for a week or a month. They won't get anything. And then they'll just say, hey, this doesn't work. But as I'm sure you would confirm on your end as well, it just kind of takes some time. I guess in your experience, and I have some other things I want to share about it. In your experience, how long does it take and how consistent do you need to be? Is this like a once a week thing? Is this an everyday thing? Like what sort of cadence should folks be sharing this information? And what time frame, which I always have a hard time answering this question, so good luck, but what sort of time frame can folks expect some sort of result to give them that dopamine hit, give them that win to actually continue along and ultimately have more of an inbound business?
Yeah, so it really, really depends. It really depends. It depends on the person. It depends on how many connections they have, both online and offline. It depends on how well they've been nurturing those connections, what their existing personal brand already is, which includes what people say about you when you're not in the room, right? You have a personal brand, whether or not you've started showing up online, you already have a personal brand in terms of what people say about you when you're not in the room. And it also depends on the range of content that you use. If you've got a good range, if you 1 minute you're educating, the next minute you're getting people connected to your heart by sharing your personal story, and the next minute you've got a very specific call to action, right? Those are just 3 example categories of the kind of categories that are important if you really want to generate leads. If you're just doing one type of content, if you're just putting out one type of content, it's more likely that you'll be going for longer and not seeing results. So it really does depend. I think one of the things that I encourage my clients to do is to really flex the muscle of creating content so that it becomes almost like breathing to them. So I encourage them to get in the habit of, if they have an experience with a client, let's say they have a conversation with a client where the client says, oh my God, I was so nervous about this. And I was thinking about keeping all my money in the bank. And now, you've given me the confidence to now, invest, and I'm not scared anymore. Could you tell this is an impression of an old lady? a lovely old lady who's like terrified to put her money anywhere other than the bank. And, there's ways that you can ethically and legally share examples of things that are happening in your daily business and in your daily life that create those openings for people to then message you and inquire. But absolutely, as you spoke to, it really does depend. It's kind of how long is what do they call it? How long is a piece of string? and I think another really important part of it, as you touched on earlier, is continually adding new connections. Because if you're not continually adding new connections, it doesn't matter how great your content is, you're not going to have those inbound inquiries.
Yeah. And it's the example I always share with folks is, let's say, for example, one of your current clients talks to one of their friends about you and what you do. And that prompts them to maybe seek you out on social media. So maybe they watch, a video on YouTube, perhaps they see an infographic on Instagram, maybe a blog on like LinkedIn or something like that, drives them to your website. And then maybe they also find out that their accountant knows who you are and does some work with you. And then ultimately they reach out to you and decide to do business. What gets the credit? Right? Is it the content? Is it the client? Is it the accountant? Is it the website? And I would argue, and based on your head nod, I'm thinking that you're going to agree that the entire marketing strategy gets the content. But what I really like about it is you're able to shoot a video, you're able to write a blog, you're able to create an infographic once and have it seen hundreds, if not thousands of times. So it allows you to kind of make them aware of who you are and what you do at scale. And when you add in, as you mentioned, personal stories, or even things as simple as, sharing a picture from a vacation that you took with your family, or if you're into biking, right, sharing that, it humanizes you as well. And it helps kind of build a relationship from afar. And what I've found, I'd be curious to hear kind of your experience in this. What I've found is when you're creating all this stuff, all this content, and you have it educational and informational in nature, not salesy in nature, where every single video there's a call to action, making sure that you're just doing it for the sake of helping people. What I found is when people actually reach out to you to learn more about what you do, the majority of them do business with you because they've already gotten to know you. They already gotten to like you. There's already some credibility in their eyes. And then you got to royally mess up to not make them a client. But I guess what's been your experience either for yourself or with some of the folks that you work with that have actually executed on this on a consistent basis? Do you find that their close ratio is kind of the same? Is it higher? What's kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've definitely found, as you spoke to, when this is done right, both for myself and client, their conversion rate shoots. And it gets to the point where, in the early days, when you were getting inquiries from anyone, and you'd have a call coming, you'd be thinking, well, I wonder which way this one's going to go, right? Yeah. You don't experience that anymore because people are so pre-qualified. They're so pre-qualified. And if they are not going to be a good fit, they're probably not going to inquire because your content is continually telling them at what level you operate. It's continually educating them. It's continually informing them. It's continually disarming them. It's continually priming them so that then at the point at which you're having a conversation, a one-to-one conversation, it's a breeze. It's a breeze. The work's already done.
And they feel like they know you. So they're coming into that call a little bit more comfortable than otherwise they would have been, especially as a financial advisor. It's kind of like a doctor where it doesn't matter the person's age, whether they're, male or female, whether, they're rich or poor. Like there's some level of intimidation when you meet with an advisor, and you kind of are able to dissipate that, by giving them the opportunity to get to know you from afar. Two quick things I just want to mention. So that book, Crushing It, is a good resource for anyone listening. And then also, if you Google 64 pieces of content and then type in Gary V afterwards, Vaynerchuk, even more specifically, there's a slide deck. It's like 270 pages long. Don't get overwhelmed. They're very simple slides. You can get through it in like 20 minutes. And also don't get overwhelmed by the idea of 64 pieces of content in a single day. But what I really like about that slide deck is it breaks down platform by platform and shares with you how to create one sort of longer form macro piece of content, and then how you can kind of chop that up in micro bits to share across other platforms. So the whole idea is it shares with you platform by platform what sort of content is appropriate for those, while also sharing with you how to magnify that by kind of chopping it up. So just kind of want to share that quickly. Before we go over to the client retention side of things, Jaimie, I've shared a couple of resources. Any resources, books, podcasts, videos, anything like that, where if someone is considering diving in to leveraging social media, which, side note, don't compare this Garyism, don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10 or 20. So don't let that intimidate you. If you were to scroll down to when they first started, their videos, their content looks totally different then than it does now. So just know that you'll continue to evolve. But what sort of resources do you have in your back pocket for our folks to check out if they're considering entering into this space?
So I actually have a really girly one. I don't know where it is, but it's it's somewhere. It's a little I'll send you the link later, but it's basically a really small book. It is like, this is not the book, but it's like the size of this one. And it's just got little tips on different ideas for content. And it's just so useful for, like, if you're feeling stuck and you just want to think, you want a suggestion there and then, like testimonial, personal story, example of a result a client got, example of when a client felt nervous and how they handled it, things like that. And that's a really good book that I recommend to lots and lots of clients.
Cool. We'll definitely follow up with me on that, and then we'll include the link to that book in the show notes. Also, we put together these pieces called what we call client journey maps. So we have a couple avatars. So like business owners as one, retirees as the other. And essentially what happens in this document that we put together is there's different phases of like a decision-making process that someone goes through and questions that they ask themselves. And so we have all those questions listed out and whatnot. And what I kind of realized as our team put that together is all the questions that these people are asking at different stages in the decision-making process. If you just created content around trying to answer those questions, they're going to feel like, oh my God, this person is speaking exactly to me. And it's going to help aid in getting them from, a point of awareness of who you are to getting to know, like, and trust you, that ultimately doing business with you. So try and think with the folks that you're trying to serve, what kind of questions are they asking, and create some content around that. Now, I do think transitioning over to client retention, what we've talked about so far, Jaimie, is very much applicable to client retention as well, because the idea of staying relevant and omnipresent and ensuring that you're continuing to add value beyond the sale, beyond the acquisition of them as a client. But what other things can advisors be doing to help aid in the retention of a client? Because you put in all this work in the front end, and if you ultimately just lost them, it's like, oh man, what could I have done differently? So outside of content, what can folks be focusing on to be able to retain the people that they work so hard to get in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think a lot of people take for granted that marketing isn't just about how you get someone in. Marketing is the process of creating customer value. So that includes creating value for them after they've become a customer and long into their customership, right? It's not just the hook. And I think a few of the things that myself and my clients find really useful, having a really clear onboarding process, having really clear information. Here's what to expect. Here's the journey we're going to take you through. Here's what to do if you have a question. Also setting expectations around, this might feel really uncomfortable for you. You might feel like you want to run away and hide. You might feel like you want to do a U-turn on this because this is scary and new. And that's natural. And a lot of my clients experience that, right? This is what they're saying. A lot of my clients experience this. It's very normal. It's very natural. If you're having a freak out and you want to give me a call, and you want me to talk you off the cliff, I'm here. Here's my number. Things like that make all the difference. If you don't address the elephant in the room of fear and anxiety, and you spoke to this just now with your great, journey maps and the questions, because that's, the questions that they have are often either rooted in fear, desire, right? Or it's a more intellectual question, right? But the most pertinent questions are rooted in either desire, like they really, really want something, or they're rooted in fear. And so the more that you can be addressing that ahead of time, both through your content and through the onboarding process, the less likely it is that someone's going to panic and run away.
I'm really glad that you brought the onboarding process up. So in working with clients, they have this, call it a mixture of fluffy and analytical discovery process. Fluffy in that you're talking about the goals, the dreams, the things they want to accomplish. And then the analytical side, which is the actual, financial plan that they're putting together to help that person, get from point A to point B. And then once they get to the onboarding process, it tends to be very kind of dry and logistical, time intensive, paperwork back and forth. And it's like, they have a tough time kind of spicing that up. And I think that if you do a good job on the front end of the discovery process, getting to know them personally, the things that are going on in their life currently, you can weave in as simple as a PS. Hey, PS, how's the home renovation coming along? PS, how's little Johnny like in his first year in college? PS, insert some sort of nicety in the mix to just make it less dry, I guess. But then you're also on the discovery process, there's a thing called the anchoring effect, where if you can anchor them in an unbelievable experience, when things get dry or if things get messed up because paperwork may get messed up, they got to send them back out, they tend to be a little bit more forgiving along the way. Whereas if on the front end, it's just an issue after an issue after an issue, eventually there's going to be an issue where they're like, hey, screw this, I'm going somewhere else. So you got to anchor them in a positive mindset. So let's assume now, Jaimie, that they're onboarded. They had a great discovery experience. They had a great onboarding experience, all things considered. And now they're kind of in their, call it normal review cycle, where they're meeting with their advisor, 1, 2, 3, 4 times a year, depending on the service model. What can be done beyond the initial, call it 90-day sprint, throughout the next 10, 20, 30 years, however long they end up working with the advisor? What are some of the things that they can be doing to continue to strengthen that retention?
Yeah. So as you said, content that is designed to magnetize new clients can also do an amazing job of retaining existing clients, because it shows them, hey, I'm committed to my game. I'm still committed to my clients. I'm still here. I'm still developing. I'm still growing, right? Especially if, you as an advisor, you're amassing extra qualifications, extra credentials, etc., sharing about those things. So your existing clients, as well as your new clients, know that you're continually committed to them. That can work really well. And then also, as you said, remembering those personal things, if one of the reasons they set something up was to help their grandchild with their college fund, and that it's their grandchild's first birthday or second birthday tomorrow, dropping them a note. Hey, hope little Johnny has a great birthday, right? Hope you all enjoy celebrating. These things do make such a difference, because people really, it's, so it sounds like a cliche, but people do really buy people. And when people feel a level of heart connection with you, so they feel like they get you, as you said, but also they feel like you get them and you care about them on a heart level, right? You care about them on a heart level, on a human level, as well as caring about the end result for them. And I think sometimes people think, oh, well, surely it's enough to be committed to the end result. Surely it's enough to be, committed to getting them the results. No, if they don't know that you actually care about them on a human heart to heart level, they are much more likely to drop off. But when they know that you care about them on a human level and you remember these little things and you're there for them and you genuinely care, it's rare for people to leave. As you say, unless they're having a really horrendous experience, it's much more rare for people to leave.
The overarching statement that I'll say is it's just giving an extra, what, right? Just going above and beyond. One of the best ways to their heart, as you alluded to, is through kids, grandkids, even pets. Like what if they got a dog toy in the mail for their dog? Like things like that goes a very, very long way, especially when those things happen outside of the review process. So not like right after a review, but instead, maybe a couple months before or after a review where they're like, oh, wow, David's still thinking of me. Jaimie's still thinking of me. Like that was nice. And, the other thing that you hit on was in terms of helping them get to their destination is not enough. And what that makes me think of is when you meet their expectation, like they're paying you to help them get there. So when you just do that, it's just you meeting expectations. It's not you elevating the experience and going above and beyond. So you can expect, which we'll get to here in a moment, you can't expect to have them be talking about you all the time and ultimately introducing you to folks because you're just kind of meeting their expectations and not necessarily making them feel amazing. So I guess transitioning over to that. So we've talked about ways to attract folks. We've talked about ways to retain folks. How the heck do we meet more folks? What are some referral strategies that advisors can consider?
Yeah. So, once you've built that connection and you've built that trust and you've demonstrated to them that you really care about them, you care about the result, but you also care about them on a human level. Once that's established, it's a great time to ask your clients, who do you know who needs me? And you can be really specific. So let's say you specialize in helping entrepreneurs with a certain level of liquidity, right? Like 5 million plus, for example. You say, do you know any other entrepreneurs with a liquidity of 5 million plus who really want to make their money work for them? And you let them know, I'd love to support them. And then you can also incentivize that.
It's interesting that you bring that up. So we had an episode probably 3 or 4 episodes ago with my old managing partner when I was an advisor, Aaron Miller. And he came from a super crappy marketplace, ultra, kind of blue collar workforce, paycheck to paycheck type of network was his initial start in the business. And he was struggling to find people with money because he just didn't know anyone that had money. And what he shared in that podcast, which you just kind of alluded to, is he just started asking in his process, hey, who do you know that has money? Right. So you can start with someone who doesn't have money and just, hey, who do you know that has money? To ultimately get to the point where you can ask that question, hey, who else do you know that's like you, has a successful business and also has some liquidity as well? And it kind of goes to this saying that I borrowed from someone and can't give credit because I forget who it is, but you have not because you asked not, right? Oftentimes we're just one question away from getting exactly what you want. But oftentimes, and I'd be curious to hear your take on this, Jaimie, my theory is that oftentimes folks don't ask those questions. And the reason is, in my opinion, and my theory, is if you look back through that relationship with the client, in your heart of hearts that you're just meeting expectations. You're not going above and beyond. So therefore you feel guilty ultimately making a withdrawal from that relationship because you don't feel as if you deposited enough into it to really warrant that ask. Does that have some legs behind it, or am I off base there?
I think your analogy is such a great one, keeping an eye in all relationships, right? Not even just business relationships, but, all relationships, right? Have I earned the right to make a withdrawal here? Have I earned the right to make a request? I think what I found with clients is often they won't make a request just because they're not in the habit of making requests, even if they've absolutely earned the right and they've made plenty of deposits and no withdrawals. So especially kind of empathic, more highly sensitive, more highly intuitive people who are like very caring, maybe a little bit introverted, they tend to feel the most nervous about making the ask, even if they've absolutely earned it. But I think as an advisor, you have to go within and you have to ask yourself the question, have I earned the right? If I haven't earned the right, okay, let me go away and make some more deposits and nurture this relationship more and then ask. And if you have earned the right, then just ask the damn question.
I agree. And typically, if you're lacking confidence, as you just mentioned, it's because, or you need to then look at, well, what does my client experience look like? What does my marketing look like? Do I deserve to ask for these introductions based on the service and the experience that I'm currently delivering? And oftentimes when you go back and kind of reorient and up your game, so to speak, then you're like, all right, I'm doing all the things that I should be doing and then some, let me go and ask for an introduction. And also just a small subtlety, but I like the word introduction when using client facing language as opposed to referral. Because if I, let's say I walked into a room and you and Amir, who introduced us, were having a meeting. Amir wouldn't necessarily refer me to you in that moment or vice versa, but he would certainly introduce us. Right. So just the small subtlety of using the word introduce instead of refer tends to go a long way because people are more naturally inclined to introduce folks.
Yeah, definitely. Like you can think about it as a referral in your mind, right? In your own brain, you're like, oh, this is a referral. Great. But as you said, the language that you're using with the customer of introduction is so much softer and juicier and more compelling. Definitely. That's such a great point.
So we've talked about client attraction, client retention, let's call it multiplying your clients through asking for introductions. And I think the common theme that we've discussed so far is you need to go above and beyond what the expectations are while also magnifying and amplifying yourself through content so that you can widen your reach. And, if you were to call, text, or email a client every single day with some information, it's going to get pretty old pretty quick. But when they're going on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever social platform, they're going there to consume content. So they're either going to consume yours or someone else's. So you can, in fact, post every day. And as long as it's valuable, helpful, insightful, relatable, then you can post every day and it's not going to be a big deal in terms of annoyance, but it will be a big deal in terms of building that relationship with them. So I think that's, if I were to take out a common theme, it would be elevate and expand yourself through content in general. But anything you'd like to add to that before we transition over to the book that you chose?
I think you summed it up perfectly. And I think that the distinction that you introduced of the difference between emailing and showing up online is a really juicy one, right? Because you might not send an email to a customer more than once a week, but if you're showing up online, you're still having many, many touch points as long as you're showing up in the place where they hang out, right? And you want to know, where does your ideal client hang out? Do they hang out on Facebook? Do they hang out on LinkedIn? Like, where are they hanging out? And show up in those places. And so you get so many more touch points without being intrusive. I think that's really where the magic happens, is that blend of personal connection, corporate communications, if applicable, sharing important things that are happening periodically. But then those bonus touch points, they like totally bonus touch points.
I agree. And once you're in the groove, it becomes second nature and it becomes easier. But there's the initial hump that you need to work through, because it's something that a lot of folks have never done before. But trust the fact that it does work, but you need to commit, you need to be consistent, and then ultimately you'll increase your confidence moving forward in all the things that you're doing. So with that being said, for those of you who may be listening for the first time, one thing that we ask all of our guests is what one of their favorite books is. And the reason why we do so is There's so many good books out there, and it can be overwhelming. So since we're bringing on top-notch people onto the podcast, we want to ask those top-notch people what they're reading. What's the book that has had a big impact on them? And Jaimie, you chose The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. Sorry if we mispronounced the name. It's Duhigg. I did my best there. But why'd you pick that book? What sort of impact did it have on you? And why should others consider reading that book or listening to that book?
So I listened to this book so most of the time I'm reading books, I listen to them on Audible because it just works better for me and my brain. And I listened to this book every day on the New York subway in 2015, commuting to my corporate marketing job. And what I love about it is it just makes it so easy and simple and clear that anything that you want to accomplish, anything that you want to change is just a case of doing something consistently. It's that simple. Right? If you want to become amazing at producing content, the best way you do it is you start and you do it every single day. And for the first couple of weeks, if you're doing it alone and you don't have support, which you don't need to do it alone, then you might be a bit shit for a while. When I look at my early content, the truth is I was already creating storytelling content long before I became an entrepreneur. I just didn't realize I was doing it. So when I became an entrepreneur, it was easier for me. But even then, my first few months of content were so broad and so I really want to appeal to everyone. And then over time, it's become more and more specific, more niche, more valuable, etc. But I just think that everyone needs that reminder that it doesn't have to be that complex, that you don't have to become a fundamentally different person. You don't have to learn to suck eggs. You don't have to go and get a PhD in marketing. You just need to practice sharing your voice and sharing your message every single day for at least 2 minutes a day. And if you do that, you will become better. And I'm using the example of content because it's one of the things that we've been talking about today. But this book, that applies to any area.
I agree. And, it's important to note, and most people know this, but just to say it out loud, no one ever became great at doing something some of the time. They became great because they did it all the time, day in and day out, whether you're an athlete, a professional, an entrepreneur, into fitness, whatever it may be, it's something that you worked at diligently every single day. There's a lot of books out there that focus on, habits or routine or whatever. The important part is just figuring out which strategy resonates with you the most and just take action on it. So maybe that's this book, The Power of Habit. There's another good one called Atomic Habits. And what you'll notice is when you read all these different books, there will be one that resonates most with you, but oftentimes they rhyme, so to speak, with the other books. But just pick whatever is going to work best for you and just do it. Commit to it, be consistent with it, and then ultimately you'll benefit from it. And those around you will benefit from it as well.
And I think one of the things that often comes up for people is they expect someone to come along and wave a magic wand and suddenly they're great at something. And it's actually, we become great at things by doing them consistently. And when we've done them consistently for a while, and this is one of the things that the book speaks to, when we've done them consistently for a while, they become automatic. They do become automatic if we're consistent. So it can and will get to the point where if you are consistent, especially if you're doing something at the same time every day, whether it's following up with leads or creating content or sending a thoughtful message to a client, knowing that it's going to aid in the retention of that client ethically, if you do it at the same time every day, it will become automatic. It will become like breathing. And then you don't even have to think about it. It doesn't have to use up any of your willpower. It just happens. And I think the more that we can do that, the better, because you want to save your willpower for the things that really need your willpower, not for the basic day-to-day activities that we just want to become like breathing. We want them to become automatic.
And they can become fun too, right? When you're getting good feedback on your content, when you're advancing the relationship with clients and prospects in your book of business, your job is essentially to pass out wisdom and pass out smiles. And when you get that good feedback, it kind of keeps you going as well, because it's a nice little dopamine hit over back to you. So I appreciate your input on that book. That will be linked in the show notes as well. With that being said, Jaimie, this has been a pleasure. I like that from a mindset standpoint, there's a variety of things that we connect on and we agree with. So I appreciate you coming on, sharing your perspective. It certainly resonated with me. Hopefully for all the folks who are listening, it's resonated with you as well. Now, Jaimie, if they want to connect with you to kind of see what your content looks like, or perhaps they want to explore how you can help them on a more personal level, where should they find you?
So I'm at www.jaimiesarah.com. There's 2 I's because my mom was being arty. So JAIMIESARAH. She combined Jamie and Jem to make a brand new name. JaimieSarah.com. On Instagram, I am definitely, and everywhere else, I'm Jaimie Sarah.
Awesome. So go check out that. Now, 2 quick things for folks who are listening. Number 1 is if you'd like to connect with me as well, my Instagram is just at David_Decel. That's probably the most active platform that I'm on. So feel free to connect with me there. Shoot me a DM. Happy to chat. Happy to answer questions. We also have a lot of resources at modelfa.com with obviously our podcast, our blog, our video series. So feel free to check that out. Lots of great information in there that could help you. And then also, if you would be so kind as to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast, that would help a lot with expanding the show to other listeners, other advisors, other folks that would find some value from it. So if you would be so kind to leave us a review, that would be fantastic. And once that review posts, actually, if you send me a screenshot of that review, you can just email that to me at david@modelfa.com. And earlier in the episode, I referenced our client journey maps that has a bunch of questions that these folks are asking along every stage of their decision-making process. And A, that would be helpful to just know, but B, it would be helpful if you are considering getting into the content game or elevating your current content strategy. So if you shoot me an email with that review, typically our paying clients get that. So as a thank you, I'm happy to share those PDFs with you. So feel free to leave us a review and you get that client journey map. So Jaimie, it's been a pleasure. For everyone listening, I appreciate your time. Again, Amir, if you're listening to this, thanks for connecting Jaimie and I. And Jaimie, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Take care.